Hi, welcome back to Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. I'm Kenny Fogle, your host. We're going to talk about a little bit of something that you've probably been seeing going on in your community all over the Nelson County area. And right now we're seeing it's harvest time. And what that means is basically a lot of the farmers are harvesting their crops, or maybe they're getting prepared for the shipping off their cattle or whatever they're going to do. And we got the guru of agriculture here with me right now, Mr. Adam Wheatley. And Adam, well, yeah, guru is the right word. I don't know what other word to use right now, but Adam, do appreciate you stopping in here. We had you here about a year ago or so when we're talking about agriculture economics. And I think that's part of what we want to talk about today is as much what's going on in agriculture as people see the corn grow and they see the cattle and hogs and things like that, but you see it from a different angle. You actually see it from a ledger book to some degree, because this is what you do.
You know, you mentioned the harvest time. I like to remind everybody out there watching that it is harvest time, and this particular time of year there's a lot of equipment out on the road. Please be careful. You know, these guys they're busy, they're putting in a lot of hours, and they're concentrating on getting that crop in and getting that paycheck, which is a good thing. And that equipment doesn't move as fast as you'd like it to. Please be patient and deal with them, and we certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, we are a rural area, so it's not like we don't see too many tractors going down I-65, but we do down 150.
That's right, and that's how we get things done, and we get equipment from one place to another, from A to B. So it's good, but it is harvest time, and it's payday. Now, a lot of our farmers that have the ability plan ahead and don't necessarily sell at harvest time. You know, they store it you see the big grain bins on these farms, these big metals, they're not silos, but they're round. Yeah. Some of those hold 50, 60,000 bushels. You know, years ago, most bins on a farm held 3 to 10,000 bushels, and now they hold 40 to 60,000. And the reason being, you can hold it at harvest when the price is typically at the lowest until maybe 3 or 4 or 5 out when the price rebounds, and you can make more bang for your buck. So it makes sense to be able to store it and hold it until the price rebounds and does a little better.
You know, a lot of people don't understand. You know, farmers are just like playing the stock market in many ways, because you've got to know what to buy, and supply and demand.
Supply and demand, and if you think about it, obviously at harvest time, you got to figure the supply is big. So at harvest time, the price is typically, not 100%, but typically at harvest, the price is lower because everybody is bringing that crop in, and there are several that don't have the ability to store it, so they're forced to sell immediately. So therefore, it does drive the price down, and that way, if you're able to keep it, if you go to March, April, May, and then a lot of times, depending on how much crop was stored, you can, if you wait till July or August, you might get a premium for your crop because the supply is down, which drives the price up.
Well, and you and I talked yesterday about economics when it comes to agriculture, and I know you talked about how the stock market, the commodity market in particular, how it affected the cost of farming and what it's done, and some of you haven't even rebounded from yet.
No, and it's hard because every one of our farm products is a commodity that is traded on the open market, okay? And there are people that manipulate that market one way or another that have nothing to do with farming. And that's always a frustration for the ag-oriented peoples, because a lot of time our price is changed or affected by people that have nothing to do with agriculture, and they're hedging themselves, or they're betting one way or another, and they negatively affect the market sometimes. Now, sometimes it goes the other way. But when the stock market fell in August of 15, the prices of all of our grains, the corn, wheat, and beans, and then also the cattle price really plummeted, and it has not rebounded. So even though your 401ks and some of that have come back up, your farm commodity prices have not. And some of it is the way the export system works and the world demand for some of our products.
Well, I always just figured that basically at some point the farmer has us over a barrel because you control our food.
We do control the food, but we don't control the price. So sometimes we look at it as the other way. We're over the barrel because we'll work all year, and we plan, actually farmers are planning now for what they're going to plant next year because they're pre-ordering their fertilizer and their seed and getting their organization out. So we're planning and don't know what's really going to happen. So we plan, we plant, we fertilize, and then we harvest, not really knowing what our price will be. Now, a lot of our large producers do sell on the futures, which is a good thing. But a lot of times they sell at the minimum price to cover their losses in case there is a price drop that you can't control. So I would say that some of our larger producers probably will plan ahead for 50 to 70% of their crop
Yeah.
and try to lock in a price that may or may not be the most profitable. And at harvest time, the price may be considerably higher or considerably lower. And they
Well, I guess
take
that's a
heat.
big question because corporate farms, large farms, are they squeezing out the small farmer, or
Well,
where is it the future?
a
What's
lot
the
of
future
people-
of the small
I
farmer?
think there's misconception on what people think of a corporate farm.
I don't
Most
know.
of our grain operations are large family operations. Okay, I don't want to mention any names, but there's about 6. If you take the Washington, Marion, Nelson County area, there's 6 pretty good sized grain operations that do, I'd say 75% plus of the grain. The reason is the equipment you see out there. One of those combines that has a 30 or a 45 foot head that's combining beans. A new combine like that costs $800,000 to $1 million. Now, if you have 20 acres out behind your house, you're not going to buy $1 million combine
No,
for 20 acres.
my Cub Cadets go out to do the
There you
job.
go. So these large family farms have had to acquire large areas of planting and harvesting to justify that equipment. And the spraying, okay, we had an ag day for the young leaders today, which was an outstanding day. We had 25 of our area youth that we visited 4 different operations, and they were educated on agriculture in Nelson County. One of the things we talk about is technology. Some of this equipment that we have is enabled with such sophisticated technology. Most people, it would blow your mind. These sprayers are GPS linked to satellite, and they've mapped out their field. The field may be just shaped like this table, but your equipment doesn't necessarily fit the same grid. And the GPS and the auto steer and the way that this stuff works, the computer can shut off planters or sprayers with nozzles or planting vanes to not go outside certain lines or not to double up, which makes our spraying and fertilization much more efficient and much more ecologically friendly as well. But it's all about the bottom line. We can't afford to be spending money where we don't need to.
Absolutely. Well, I know the lady who lives across from me has got a huge cornfield, and I was this past summer. My grandson come running in the house and said, "Granddad, there's a helicopter in our front yard."
Yep.
And I go out there and there's a helicopter 20 feet above
He's
the ground spraying the field.
They were spraying a fungicide. There was it's a rust, which is a fungus, and there was a rust that attacked the corn crop this year. And if the acreage that was not sprayed like you saw, the yield was probably 2/3 of what it should have been. We had a lot of corn this year that only yielded in that 125 to 150 bushel range that should have been 175 to 225. And that rust got into the corn, and it shut off the ability of that plant to feed itself to produce a larger crop.
Is that something you can predict at the beginning of the year, or is that something weather related?
It's weather related, and it's you can't outguess it. But we had a very wet year. Ron Bowman, our county extension specialist, has mentioned 2 or 3 times in the last month that this is the first year he can remember saying we've had too much rain during the summer. Well, what happens on these plants when there's abundance of rain? They do not send out a root system that has to go out and search out moisture. Well, what happens is when those roots are searching out moisture, they're also absorbing nutrients from that soil that help promote the growth, the stability, the strength, and the yield. Well, when they're not searching for that moisture, they're also not getting down there and picking up that extra nutrient that boosts the yield. So our frequent rains caused a shallow root, which caused a lower yield, allowed the plant to be more susceptible to that rust. And it also, several of us probably saw cornfields that had tops broke off. Well, that rust caused some of our winds that wouldn't have normally affected that corn to have it either blow completely over or the tops break out.
Well, and we'll get into we talked a little bit about the grain beef. Obviously, the beef is something that people think a lot of because they like to have their steak and their burgers.
I think a whole lot of it.
You think a whole lot of it. Well, where are we standing? Are we good to go right now?
Cattle prices are also at about their lowest they've been in the last 5 years. Okay, now if you go back 7+ years, they're about normal. But we hit about a 3-year spike in beef prices that was tremendous, and the cattlemen in this state really reaped the benefit of a really high, stable market for 3 years. And it spoiled us. So now we're back to where we were before that, which all commodities, all ag products have a kind of a roller coaster ride on the prices. So the beef, we're actually at a low point. So it has been a little depressing because the last 3 years we've had an unusually high point, and that became the new normal.
Okay, beef though, I mean, like you're selling it, saying it's selling low, but I'm not seeing the prices of ribeyes go down in stores. Somebody's making some money.
Yes, sir. And see, that's always a misconception. The beef prices in the store stays a lot more stable than what we get when we sell it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's your middleman. When you buy that steak at the grocery store or at your restaurant, the pay to pay those people and their insurance has all come out of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has gone up. Mm-hmm. So that's made up maybe the difference. But I tell people, when you go get a $25 steak at a restaurant, the farmer probably only got about 50 cents of that.
Mm.
Okay.
That's not a good thing.
No. But that's the way it's always been.
Well, I guess that leads me to our next question: is the future of farming? Well, obviously we got to feed the world. We can't do away with that farming. What are we going to do?
You eat every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you what,
I like eating.
I like it too. And the population of this planet is soon going to be 7 billion people. Mm-hmm. 7 billion people are going to have to eat every day. And if they don't, there's going to be a lot of problems. But farming has a tremendous upside, and I'm always very optimistic and very motivated when I speak to groups about farming, because we do have to eat every day, and there's always going to be a demand. Now, we've become much more efficient, much more productive. Our equipment, our technology, and everything is way better than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. And I talked to the kids this morning, and this is the year 2016. In 1916, 100 years ago, the population in Nelson County was about 16,000 people. Yeah. Today, our population is 44,500, give or take. We're actually actively farming more acres of cropland in Nelson County now than we were 100 years ago. By 24 to 30,000 is what we were actively cropping in 1916, and we're at 80,000 now. But the reason is that technology. We've got the equipment. In 1916, when your grandfather or great-grandfather was harvesting corn, how'd they harvest it?
Oh, by hand.
Exactly. How'd they plant it? Okay, so now we've got, Well,
I think that's the thing that would surprise most people listening in today, because most people keep thinking, well, you see all these subdivisions going up, we're losing farmland, but we're not.
No, we're not. There's a lot more land being utilized now than was 100 years ago because of the technology and because of the equipment. We can take land now and operate on it that we couldn't 100 years ago. A lot of it is our innovations in no-till planting. Before 20 years and back, everything was plowed and disked. Well, you couldn't plow and disc land that had a little bit of a slope to it.
Right.
Well, see, now with no-till planting, which conserves the soil and also conserves your nutrients, you can crop land that wasn't cropped 100 years ago because of that one thing. And it has made a lot more land available to raise corn and beans on. Mm. But if you look through the county, our subdivisions are on the road front, but when you get off the road, there's still a lot of open land. There are still over 1,100 active farms in Nelson County. That's pretty good. Now, not 1,100 that are at it full time, but there's 1,100 farm families that are involved in some sort of agricultural enterprise.
Well, like I said, that's fascinating to know. Now, the young leaders you talked to today, one of them speak up and say, Adam, I'd like to get into farming. Is there a future for me? What should I be looking at?
And there is a tremendous future because, again, everybody's got to eat, and there's going to be a need for that. And whatever field, whether it's the technology, the mechanics, or the actual production, whether it's crop or livestock, there's a tremendous need and there's a tremendous opening. The average farmer in the United States is approaching 60 years old. Mm-hmm. I'm 53. I look about 90, I know, okay? My wife calls me to prematurely gray. But I'm 53 years old, and I'm considered a young farmer because the state average or the national average is right at 60. Yeah. So we need younger people coming in, and there are a lot of programs that encourage young people to get involved in agriculture because we need them. And believe it or not, the technology draws a lot of young people in because they're fascinated by it, and they also are fascinated by, here's an opening and here's an area where we've got a definite future and can make a difference.
Well, agriculture, like I said, it's more than just what you and I grew up on farms, and it's more than just the farming aspect anymore. It's more like an agribusiness.
Well, because when you and I were growing up, and my parents and grandparents, every farm had a few cows, a few pigs, a big garden, a tobacco patch, and chickens.
Yeah.
Everybody. Well, see, now you either do chickens, hogs, cattle, or grain because of the cost of the equipment, but also the expertise that's involved there. So more people are specialized, and that's why the grain people are bigger, the cattle people are bigger, and believe it or not, chickens have made a tremendous aggressive move in the state of Kentucky for the eggs, the meat, and everything. And there's a growth in that area.
Now, some young man, young woman out there right now looking to get into agribusiness and get excited about what we're talking about right now. Who should they go to? A counselor in school? Looking up something online?
There's several things. Our extension offices have a lot of information there, but you could talk to your counselors, and then there are at least 3 or 4 schools in the state of Kentucky that have very prominent agriculture programs. Now, I graduated from the University of Kentucky with a degree in agriculture, and so I'm partial to them. And they have one of the more prominent ag colleges on the planet. And they're responsible for developing and promoting some of our most modern technology in plants and animals. Okay? When I was there, one of the professors I worked under, they were developing different types of grass that were much more productive, and in particular fescue. Fescue is the most common grass in the state of Kentucky. Well, one reason fescue is so prominent is because it has a natural fungus in it that will not allow the animals to eat it into the ground. So when that fescue gets about 3 or 4 inches tall to the ground, which is short, and when they graze it down, that fungus is in there and it's bitter tasting, and animals won't eat it.
Not even goats.
No, they want the supple green growth, but because of that fungus that exists there, they won't eat it. But that fungus also causes some minor health issues. I say minor, they're not minor if they're costing you money, but if they get in there and consume a lot of that fungus, it affects their growth and their circulation, especially in their legs. It's called fescue foot, and it causes a circulation issue that can reduce the growth of the animal and milk production and everything. But we have developed types of grass that don't have that. But the problem is that animal will now eat it in the ground. So you've got to use appropriate management to where you're rotationally grazing and you give that plant a break. It's just like everybody. Everybody needs a vacation. So that plant needs to have, say you graze it 3 to 4 weeks, you need to give it a 3 or 4 week rest, go graze something else and come back. And on my farm, and I talked to the kids about it, we have actually 109 acres of grass. That's not counting trees and water and driveway and house and yard and garden. But that's split into 17 pastures. Okay? So if you work that out, those cattle are moving in a circle. Okay? And every pasture gets a break. And during that break, it gives me a time to spread out the manure, clip it for weeds, if I need to spray it or fertilize it or work on fence and that type of stuff. And then those cattle work around, and then when they get back to that pasture again, it's been sometimes 10 weeks before they've been in it. And it's a tremendous health benefit because of parasites and everything else that don't have a chance to get a foothold because you're constantly moving those animals.
Well, in addition, like I said, to feeding the world, I mean, I know a lot of agriculture products are involved in medicines now. I mean, they found tobacco. I mean, I know Ebola is one of the things that they found is a tobacco plant.
A lot of our medical innovations have come from livestock. Of course, a lot of this stuff was developed on livestock, but a lot of the animal glands and organs are used to produce vaccines and other elements that we use in the medical field.
A pig heart. I know
a friend of mine had a pig valve a couple weeks ago, and they've been putting pig valves in people for, I know, 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
I know 30 years.
Yeah, my dad had one many, many years ago, so I know that's been around for a long time. So, again, if somebody wants to know a whole lot more about agriculture, I know Adam doesn't get too enthusiastic about everything, but he does about agriculture. So you want to stop out at the Kentucky Farm Bureau office out on 245, that's where they'll find you most days.
33 Patriot Drive, absolutely. Right. I'd be happy to help anybody that has a question.
Ask a question about agriculture, and again, you keep up what you're doing, because like I said, I like to eat. And so the farmers mean a lot to me, and I want to make sure, and that's why I want to ask that question over and over. What's the future of agriculture? And if you're telling me it's looking good, and
there is a promising future, but it's just like anything else. It takes work, it takes dedication, and you got to stay on top of your game.
Okay, so we're going to have food for a little bit longer.
You better believe it. I hope so. Or if we don't, it won't be for very long.
That's exactly right. Adam Wheatley here with us. We're talking about agribusiness, agriculture, and farming. And again, I hope you people out there, we've got some budding farmers out there, as well as some of the old timers that's been around. It's a big business now that's a whole lot different than it was when you and I were growing up in our grandfathers and fathers' days. So Adam, thank you for being in here. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We'll have you back in again here soon, because there's always something to talk about in the farming world.
Yes, sir.
All right, stick around. A lot more to come here on Channel 6 TV. We'll be right back here on Community Focus.